I think I mentioned last week, James doesn't beat around the bush. He's tough and straightforward. And I was going to say that this has been a rough year for civil conversation, but it's really been about 5 rough years for civil conversation, maybe even more. Because everywhere that we look, whether it's on the news or in social media, our concerns are expressed with angry memes and judgmental posts and mean-spirited trolls and a lot of loud arguments. And we tend to think that this is a sign of our times. But I sort of feel like James was experiencing something quite like this. For his admonitions about watching your tongue, well, they didn't come out of nowhere. Somebody has been mouthing off, and civil discourse has gone down the tubes. Obviously, painful words have been exchanged, people have been hurt, and this writer is very frustrated. And we've all been there. We've all wondered why people don't think before they speak or write or post. And much like Colleen was giving us some beautiful visual images of what God might be like, James gives us these vivid visual descriptions to illustrate the power of our words. The tongue is like a small bit that bridles a wild horse. It's small, but it takes control of the whole body. The human tongue is like a small rudder that determines the direction of a giant sailing ship. Our words that we speak can do so much good. And then again, our words can be like a small spark that sets a raging wildfire, or like a tiny drop of poison that can cause great harm. And James wasn't the first to notice the power of our words for growth or for harm. As our scriptures in Proverbs 21 says, those who guard their mouths and their tongues guard themselves from trouble. In Psalm 34, you must keep your tongue from evil and keep your lips from speaking lies. And Proverbs again says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Our words can hurt. We see it in our social media every day, and sometimes in our own thoughtless remarks that hurt others rather than heal. Words can bring us together, or they can sever relationships for a very long time. And so James is counseling us to think about our words, to use words that deepen our love with others, words of gratitude and affirmation, for these have the power to transform lives. Words can hurt. We've all heard that childhood saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I know it's meant to make us stronger, but it's just wrong. Because words can hurt us. Other people's words can hurt us, but sometimes what we don't realize that the words that we carry around in our minds can cause just as much pain and damage. Now, in their book, Words Can Change Your Brain, Andrew Newberg and Mark Waldman explain what we are dealing with in our time, and I think they're explaining what James was trying to get at. Because our language shapes our behavior. The right words spoken in the right way can bring us love and respect, while the wrong words spoken in the wrong ways can lead a country into war. Angry words send alarm signals to our brain, and they then partially shut down the logic and the reasoning centers of the brain. The negative words, whether we say them out loud or whether we're saying them in our head, they produce a release of stress hormones and neurotransmitters. And these chemicals interrupt the normal functioning of your brain, especially the part that regulates our language processing, our communication. The truth is, the more that we stay focused on negative words and thoughts, the more we can actually damage the structures of our own brains, the parts that regulate our memory and our emotions. It can disrupt our sleep patterns and our appetite, the way our brain regulates our emotions of happiness. It affects our health, leading to depression and physical illness. And negative thinking is also very self-perpetuating. The more you're exposed to it, whether it's your own or other people's words and thoughts, the more your brain will generate additional negative feelings and thoughts. And when we vocalize our negativity, even more stress chemicals are released, not only in your brain, but then in the listener's brain as well. And then both will experience increased anxiety and irritability. And that generates mistrust. And that undermines our ability to cooperate and have empathy for one another. I think maybe our human problem is that we tend to think that the only way to change someone's mind or change their behaviors is through negative language, through expressing our anger and threatening punishment or retaliation. We feel like that's the only thing that will motivate people. And yet experience and research continues to show that when dealing with conflict, anger rarely works. Even according to the United Nations, cooperation, not power, is the key to conflict resolution. In relationships, our anger, our criticism, our judgment rarely works. It only increases the negativity in both parties and affects our brains. So instead of getting rid of that anger, we increase it, and over time, it can cause irreparable damage, not only to our relationships, but to our brains as well. So I feel like in our scriptures, James and Proverbs have identified, our human problem of speaking too quickly out of anger and out of fear. But now we're beginning to learn how to change the way that we speak, ways that we can do that. For with our words, we name the world. In some ways, we create our own reality by the words that are spoken to us, by the words that we speak about ourselves and about others. Once the words that we use, the stories that we create take hold, they have tremendous power for good or for harm. They can heal or they can humiliate. They can lift people up or they can tear them down. If we think back on our own experience, how many of us have internalized some self-contempt that resulted from so many criticisms from parents or people around us? And on the other hand, most of us can still remember some compliment that was made by a teacher or a friend, even though it was made decades ago, that was life-changing in a positive way. Our sense of identity and self are formed by the words that we have heard and the way that they are spoken. So Newberg and Wald suggest that there's some steps that we can take to change the way we speak. The way that we speak to ourselves and to others is a habit that we can change. The first step that we can take is to practice relaxing, because stress can kill you after it ruins all your relationships. Stress generates that anger, and that anger shuts down our ability to communicate and to cooperate. So maybe before your next conversation that might just have some conflict in it, or before your next email or your next post, spend at least 1 minute doing a relaxation exercise, a minute of deep breathing, a body scan to relax your muscles, humming, a minute of silence, staying in the moment. And it helps to practice these, whatever works for you, every single day until that becomes a habit. And then the next step that we can take is to begin to increase our own positivity. Before you begin any conversation, take a mental inventory of your mood. Are you feeling happy? Are you depressed right now? Are you anxious? Are you calm? The best way to interrupt our mental negativity is by generating some thoughts that express compassion. Compassion for yourself, for this situation, for the other people involved. One thing they suggest is you can do this by reflecting in the moment on your deepest values. What are your deepest personal values, your spiritual values, your relational values? What is most important to you? What is your goal for yourself, and what is your goal for this relationship or all of your relationships? Might help to ask yourself, why am I angry? But not like, what did the other person do to make me angry, but what value is being challenged that I'm feeling angry about? What need do I have that's not being met and that is increasing my sense of anger? What value feels threatened in this moment? It's easy for us to lose sight of what's really important. What is the core value that we're after? What are the relationships we value? When we let that anger and that frustration and fear lead, we find ourselves saying things that deep down we don't really feel good about, not things that we actually believe. But when we identify our core values, we remember that the other person has similar values. There's something that they need, there's a value they are trying to defend. And then the next step, before we speak or before we write or before we hit post, think about how you can express some appreciation. Relationships need nurturing. You build up your emotional account with kind words and actions. We be careful about our critiques. We let people know that we do appreciate the things that they do, who they are, that we're glad they are a part of our life, even if there's something we don't disagree about. Now finally, James recommends a spiritual discipline that always helps when he said everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak. And Newberg and Walden agree, and they encourage us to listen deeply. For to listen deeply and fully, you have to train your mind to stay focused on the person who is speaking, to their words, their gestures, their facial expressions. Because listening is the greatest gift that we can give to someone. Because to be fully listened to and understood is one of our greatest human needs. We know that we need that, and the people we interact with need that just as much. Now, these changes of habit are difficult, and I am not saying this as if I've got this one down. I'm sharing these ideas as something that I am working on every day, because I feel like if we are tired of the mean and thoughtless language that we hear and that we read every day, the best place to start to change the world is with ourselves and our words. So now, let's listen to this song that Shanine is about to sing. Let's make that our prayer for ourselves, for each other, and for our world.